So let's jump in with a little bit of an introduction. I assume many people have seen this slide already this week. I know this is part of a lot of different presentations, but this is the generative AI stack of our services. Really what I want to get clear here is where we're talking about today. So I'm going to start at the bottom. At the very bottom, we've got EC2 instances with different GPU and other accelerator options, and I can build anything at this level in generative AI, right? I can train models, build models, host them. And what we found over time was that most customers were focused in on just hosting a model and being able to ask questions of it. And so early last year, we launched Bedrock. That makes it really easy to host a model, still gives you a lot of configuration and customization capability, but really makes it easy to host those models. And then last year, we watched what customers were doing with that and saw some patterns emerging in the things that they were trying to build on top of Bedrock. And so at reInvent last year, we launched Amazon Q, which comes in a few different flavors. And Q is a specific application designed to solve those problems that we saw customers trying to accomplish. So on the left, you've got Q Business, right? This is about building a RAG, about making it really easy to set up a RAG implementation and build out a chatbot. On the right, what we're going to talk about today is Q Developer. And we saw a lot of customers building out different solutions to improve the developer experience. And so we built an application that accomplishes exactly that, called Amazon Q Developer. Okay, so Q Developer is really focused on the entirety of the software development lifecycle and accelerating all of the different pieces of it. I know developers in the name, and of course it's there to help developers, but it's also going to help the rest of the IT staff that support an application throughout its lifecycle. So you've heard announcements today about what we're doing with operations and CloudWatch and the ability to diagnose issues and use Q to help you diagnose problems. We're really expanding that capability beyond the developer. In order to accomplish this, we're building Q Developer into all of the different experiences that you touch within AWS, right? So if you're in the documentation trying to learn how to do something, Q's there to help you. You don't have to read through hundreds of pages of documentation. I can just have that conversation with Q and ask questions of it. It's in the console. When something goes wrong in the console, Q's there to help me troubleshoot. It pops up proactively and says, oh, it looks like you're having a trouble. Let me show you how to fix that. And let me walk you through step by step how to fix the problem that you've got. We built it into the mobile applications. It's in Slack and Teams. So if you're talking to your teammates and working on an architecture, you can bring Q into that conversation and where you're already having that conversation. And then of course, we have DevOps platforms. You probably heard the announcement with GitLab. So we're building into different DevOps platforms and of course in the IDE, where the developers are working and we're helping to accelerate the software development process. And this is where we're going to focus our conversation today, right? It's inside the IDE. So this works as a plug-in to lots of different IDEs, VS Code, Visual Studio, goes into the JetBrains IDEs. We just announced Eclipse a couple weeks ago. So all the different places that you're writing code, we've got Q Developer there to help you. Now, Q Developer, of course, is trained on lots and lots of publicly available code examples so that it can help you. But the problem that arises is it doesn't know anything about things that are unique to you. Your internal SDKs, your APIs. It might be that you've built out a really elaborate SDK that you need to be working on all the time, or it might just be that you're doing something really simple, like you've got maybe a particular logging solution that you always use on your enterprise projects. And so you want to be able to teach Q about those things. That's what a customization is all about. So the customization allows you to train on your private code bases so that it can learn those and then be able to make suggestions about things that it wouldn't know about otherwise. You can see in this example, in this picture, that says at the top, the prompt that caused it to write this code is process a list of unassigned food deliveries around the driver's current location. Right, a very business domain specific problem that Q has learned and is then able to write code for. And it's not part of the publicly available data set. So let's start with just a really quick demo to see what this looks like, okay? And for this demo, I'm going to go very simple. Imagine that within my organization, I have a data repository object, right? I don't talk directly to a database. We've built this wrapper class that we always use, and we're doing movies. We do movie reviews. And so what I want to focus in here is, in this movie repository class, I've got these fields, right? Title, year, plot, and rating. These are the things that are important to me, and these are the things that I write into my database. So now I'm going to go use that without the customization. I've created my movie repository, I ask it to add Titanic, and you can see it's suggesting the director and the genre, which were not part of my data set. Q has no idea what my data looks like, and so it's doing the best it can, it's guessing. Now I'm going to switch over, and I'm going to come down, and I'm going to turn the customization on that I've trained it on. So I'm going to come in and select the customization, and I'm going to grab this demo customization, and I'm going to ask that same question again. But now Q is aware of and been trained on my internal code base. And now you see it knows those fields. It knows that I have a title, a year, a plot, and a rating. Because it's seen examples of that. It knows what my data structures look like as a result. You can also see that it reformatted it, right? In the first example, it was all on one line. Now it's structured it. Because when I trained it, I gave it a bunch of examples that look like the way I write code, the way I prefer it, and it's now mimicking my style too as a result of this. Okay? This is a really trivial, really simple example, but what I'm trying to show is kind of the before and after and how it's now learned our structure. In addition, I could have chats. In the chat on the left side of this, which I didn't demo, I can ask questions about my code base and about my data structures, and it's able to answer those questions just like it did in the Code Complete example. Okay, so with that quick example, what I really want to focus on is how to get value out of this and how to use this really well today. And so the first step to doing that is preparing a customization. Right? It's really about getting your data ready so that you can teach Q about the different code examples that you're going to show it. So first I'll talk about preparation. And here, you can see this is right out of the documentation, but you need to have at least 10 files. That's pretty easy to hit. And you need to have at least 2 megabytes of data. And currently, customization supports Java, JavaScript, Python, and TypeScript. So you have to have 2 megabytes of those file types. In addition, just a week or two ago, after I recorded this and got the slides ready, we did launch support for text files, like README markdown files. And that's really more relevant in the chat. So when you're having a conversation, you want to ask it questions about, like, how do I use this and how do I install it? And that stuff is usually not in the code, but in the documentation that's in a README. So those are included now as well. So for best practices, when we're looking at the code that we want to train on, a few things you want to be thinking about. First, this is going to take a text-based prompt, so you really want to be verbose about the text that you're giving it, right? You want to do things like have really verbose method names that have all the keywords in it that are likely to match, okay? Now, of course, often this code already exists. You don't have the luxury of going and making these changes and restructuring it just to use Q. So the other thing you should be thinking about is having really good, really verbose comments in your code. And so you can see here, right, I've added in a nice structured comment that describes what my fields are. I'm also giving it some additional hints, like the max length on that field is 4096. So Q can learn a lot more from this by giving it good examples. And then the final piece is you want to include a lot of examples of the usage of the class. This is actually much more important than giving it the source code to the class. Right? These generative AI applications mimic human intelligence, and when I am learning something new, I want to learn a new framework, I don't go read the source code to that framework, I go look at how it's supposed to be used. I want to see examples of how it's intended to be used, and so show it a lot of those examples. That's what it's going to learn from, okay? And then the final best practice in preparation is you really want a lot of examples. We say 2 meg is the minimum. You want to have a lot more data than that. And really, when I'm working with customers, I'm seeing very good results at around 100 megabytes or more of code, okay? And even much more than that if you have it and you can get them. Avoid duplication of code. Showing it a lot of examples of the same thing isn't helpful. That's just redundant. And avoid any non-unique code, so like including your node modules. All the files that are imported from open source packages are meaningless because it's already been trained on all of that. It's not going to learn anything new from that. It might help you get to the 2 megabyte limit, but it's not going to add value. So one more quick demo here. A lot of times when I'm working with customers, the code that they're giving it isn't already well documented. And so one of the things we'll do is use Q to help with the documentation process before we actually start training on it and do a little preparation, but still use generative AI to accomplish that. So here, this time I'm going to do this in Java. I've got a simple Java application. This is from the JUnit documentation. And there's an add, subtract, multiply, and divide method. And there's a couple tests that go along with this. And I'm just going to come into Q here, and I'm going to ask it to add comments into all my code for me. And I'm going to do this using one of the agents. They talked about agents in the keynote this morning. I'm going to do /dev to invoke an agent, and I'm going to ask it to write Java docs comments across my code base. And it's going to happen in 2 steps. So first, it's going to go through and analyze my code, and you can see it says, okay, I looked over your code, I found these 2 files. In the first, I found these 4 methods, and I'm going to go and document them for you. And then it goes on and talks about the tests and says, I also found 5 tests. I'll go and document those as well. I could ask for changes conversationally here, but I'll just let it roll. And so I let that happen, I fast forwarded there about 20, 30 seconds, and it comes back and says, okay, I've done that work for you, and I can come and look at the changes that it made. And it just went through and added comments into all of my code. So taking a little time and doing some preparation can greatly improve the results you're going to get with the customization later if you've got really well documented code. Okay, so that is step 1, right? We prepared, and it's really the most important step. The next thing I'm going to do is go and create the customization. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm just going to connect Q to one of my existing repositories. So I can connect it to Bitbucket, GitHub, or GitLab, okay? And I can be selective about what repositories I want to pick. In the demo, I'm just going to pick all of them, but I can be selective, and it's going to go through and it's just going to grab the default branch. So best practice here, we also support S3. I'm going to show you an example where we ingest directly out of one of these repositories. I'll use GitHub, but we do support S3. So first, if you're using something other than these, you can just put code in S3, but also, when I work with real customers, most of the time we put data in S3 because we want to be really selective. Even within a code base that we want it to learn, there might be some examples that we don't want it to see. I'm moving from this old log provider to this new log provider, and I don't want it to see the old examples until we're done. And so I'll be really selective and load things into S3. So as much as I'm going to show you the easy way to do this, most of the time you're probably going to do this by loading very selectively into S3. Okay, it's going to train on that, it's going to go through and ingest that, and then it's going to give you a score back. And what I really want to focus on is, this is going to be depressing. Your score is going to be terrible. They're always terrible. I got in the example that I was showing earlier in my demo, I got a score of a 3, which it considers to be poor. Don't get discouraged by this, just continue and test it and see how well it works. It is very hard to get into this category. If you're maybe an ISV with a lot of unique code, you can score this. If you're writing enterprise code that's mostly using React and Angular or MySQL database providers, Q's already learned all of that, so it's seeing very little original stuff in your code. It's only a very small portion of what it's ingesting is actually unique and new, and so you're probably going to end up in here. If you do, improve your comments, give it a few more files, and try to bring your score up as best you can. But don't be discouraged if you end up in that, in that fair category. You're probably going to get really good results even with that. So let's see a demo of this, of the actual process of generating the customization. So I'm in my GitHub account here, and you can see I've got the AWS connector for GitHub. That's used by a bunch of AWS services, code pipeline, code build, et cetera. I'll share that. So I've already got it configured, and I've given it read access to all repositories. Okay. That's pre-existing. Now I'm going to go in and actually set up the customization. So I'm going to come into the AWS console. I'm in the Q developer console. And I'm going to set up a new customization. I'll call this one Q customization GitHub. And as I said, I could select S3. Most real world applications, we actually use S3. But I'm going to go with the AWS connector. And again, I can go with Bitbucket, GitLab, GitHub. I'll select GitHub for this. I'll just give that a name. And I'll go and create this connector. I could add tags, right? If you have a tagging policy within your organization, I could add them. I'm not for the demo. But I'll go and create this connection to GitHub. That'll take a few seconds. And I'm going to come in. I could create a new app. I already have that app configured. This is the GitHub app. I've already got it configured, so I'll just select that. Again, I could add some tags, but this is good. I'll accept that. So this connection is now created. I'm going to go back into Q, and I'm just going to select that connection that I created moments ago. Of course, have the option to add tags again. I'll set up logs so I can debug if something goes wrong. I'm going to send these to CloudWatch logs, but you can send logs to S3 or Kinesis, wherever you prefer to send logs to. And then I'm just going to kick this off. And this takes a little while. Like actually going in and ingesting the code and learning it, it takes about an hour to do this, usually. I fast forwarded through that, and you can see here, this is created. You can see I got a terrible score of a 1. This is just some sample code that's out on my GitHub repository, so it's not terribly exciting. And then finally, I'm going to activate that version. So I can have multiple versions. I only have one version here. I'll activate that and get it going. Okay. And now we've got this customization completed and ready to use. The last thing I'm going to do is decide which users are allowed to use it. I'm going to grant permission to some of my users. For this, I'll just give it to all the developers. Everyone that's in the developer group will get access to it, and they can all use that customization. Okay. So with that, we've gone through the preparation stage, the most important one, where we really did a lot of the best practices. We spent a little bit of time on the actual creation, which was pretty straightforward. Now we're going to move into how to use this and monitor it. So first, as we're rolling it out, the last thing I did in the demo was I granted access to all of my developers. Best practice here, you probably want to be a little more granular than that. You've probably got different users. Maybe you've got a data science team and an app dev team, and they have very different code bases, even though they might use the same language. You probably want to have different customizations for them, because the things that this team is doing isn't going to be relevant to that team, and sharing a customization is only going to end up with things crossing over that doesn't make sense. So think and be a little more granular than I was in this demo. Once you roll that out, it's very easy for your users to then go and select among the customizations that they have access to, and to go back to the default one anytime they want. So if they're working on an open source project at night, they might choose to just go to the default provider and not use the customization. And they have the option to switch back and forth. And then the last thing you're going to be doing as you roll this out is you want to be able to monitor it. So in the Q console, you've got this dashboard. I don't have any data yet because this is a brand new customization, but you can refine that and look at the details for just a specific customization. How is this performing? What's my accept rate for this specific customization? So you can look at it and understand how well it's performing. If you're not getting what you want out of that, you can also go a lot deeper with CloudWatch and go in and do things like look at the performance of an individual language for a very specific customization and be really granular about what you're looking at. Okay, and then you can see how it's performing in different situations. How are the Python teams doing versus the front-end web team that's using TypeScript, and how is it performing in each of these cases? Okay, so we have about 2 minutes left by my clock. The last thing I want to do is just point out a couple references here, one internal, one external. So we use all of these tools internally, of course. There are a lot of teams within Amazon using Q Developer. This comes from Prime Video, and I think the important one here is they are seeing a 30% increase in acceptance rates compared to using Q without the customization. So right, this isn't a 30% increase over not using generative AI. This is an additional 30% productivity improvement here on top of what they were already getting by using the tool, which is awesome. And then the second one from an external customer comes from National Australia Bank. Okay, they rolled out to 500 developers, and they're seeing an increase of 60% over what they were getting out of Q before they ran the customization. So training these customizations sees a big lift, a huge productivity boost. And I really encourage you all to take a look at this. If you're not using Q Developer, of course, start with playing with Q Developer, get that rolled out, but then start to look at customizations, because it's going to have a huge impact on your organization and get you much better results. Excellent, and with that, I am just about out of time. Thank you very much.